Hi, my name is Michael Pearl, and I work for Robson Forensic as a police practices and premises security expert. Prior to becoming an associate here, I was a police officer for 20 years. During that time as a police officer, I conducted and went to a lot of different active shooter, armed intruder type trainings throughout the country. And one of the understandings that I gleaned as a result was that the lack of information that civilian and private companies had regarding the response to it. And doing training internally in Robson, we realized that this is a very important topic, and it would be nice to share with clients so they can understand what facets comprise of an armed intruder and workplace violence. So we come up with the reason why we're doing it, and we have to define what workplace violence is and look at some statistics and understand that dynamic. Uh, this presentation is geared towards both the employee and the employer, different patterns and responsibilities of what you want to look for that are common factors that we've seen in the past when it comes to workplace violence, and then the different responses that we try to plan for as best as we can. And again, they are responses that are are appropriate in all different fashions and all different scenarios. And we'll get into that and talk about what works, what doesn't. And kind of an overview after going through the actual training. Hope is not a plan. It's a phrase I use all the time. You can't hope that things aren't going to go a certain way or hope that things will diminish on its own. You've got to be proactive. You can't hope that you'll respond effectively if you have no tools in your toolbox. And you'll hear me say that phrase quite frequently. You need tools in your toolbox so you can refer back to what your training and understanding of responses are during these types of critical incidents. You don't know how you're going to respond effectively. And then overall things to consider to make sure that we've touched base on all the different facets of this training. So, like anything, we have to define what the workplace is. And in this particular incident, any location, either permanent or temporary, when an employee performs any work-related duties. And again, they're not included to just a building. You may be driving to and from court or going to a mediation at a private location or a municipal building, arbitrations, depositions. You may be going to a hospital for an arraignment of a suspect that has been in custody and they're not able to be produced at the courthouse. Psychiatric facilities, it may be some type of voluntary mental health issue that you need there to be there to represent your client. The judge is there as well. Nursing homes, real estate closings, divorce proceedings, custodial hearings. These are all locations where there may be some additional animosity depending on the subject matter, and folks get involved with some type of violent situation as a result, in your being present. So we've defined what the workplace is. We should be able to define what workplace violence is. It's very important understanding of this. And again, this is what OSHA comes up with: or any physical assault, threatening behavior, or verbal abuse occurring in a work setting. And you have to stress on the threatening behavior because, again, we say workplace violence, people believe it to be a physical assault with a weapon of some sort. And once we can define it and understand what that dynamic is and how broad-based that definition is, a lot more people are victims of workplace violence and they don't even realize it because it's a threat over a phone or a threat at a counter somewhere in a lobby. So it really spreads out that dynamic. OSHA has no standards for workplace violence in training, but they refer to Homeland Security guidelines. It's just an easy default to go back to Homeland Security, who provides training, and they have that on their website as well. However, OSHA does, under the General Duty Clause in 1970, employers are required to provide their employees with a place of employment that is, and this is the quotes, free from recognized hazard that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm. So inherently with workplace violence, we understand that dynamic and that definition is going to play into that General Duty Clause. Some few statistics: roughly 2 million workers a year are affected by some form of workplace violence. And again, I believe that number to be very low, only because until you understand the definition and you start incorporating non-physical when it comes to verbal threats, and people realizing that is part of the definition and not reporting it or taking it seriously and lumping it in with workplace violence, then I think those numbers are drastically low. As of 2020 data, 392 workplace homicides and 37,060 non-fatal injuries in the workplace resulting from an intentional injury by another person. I mean, those are significant numbers that shows that there's an issue that needs to be dealt with when it comes to workplace violence. More statistics here: $36 billion a year. That's for medical costs that are incurred by the employee or employer that was injured as a result, coverage for overtime, fixing of property if there was damage internally inside a business, and so on and so forth. 30 to 45 years old is a typical perpetrator, and it's a male. And again, 50% of companies surveyed reported a violent incident in the past 4 years. So it's quite obvious that this is an issue that needs to be dealt with effectively by the employers, so that they understand that there's zero tolerance for this, and we look to see what's the best ways to deal and identify what this problem is. So it's a great slide here of an incident of workplace violence. And I love this slide only because it doesn't matter how well you're trained or what your knowledge base is in the topic. If you're subject to an event, there's startle and fear. You're going to be startled. You're going to have some level of fear. However, it's the response mechanisms after that. You're going to revert back to those tools in your toolbox, like I explained before, and we go with the trained response. You can still be anxious, and you can recall what it was you're training and what it is that your expectations are and your response mechanisms. You prepare and you commit to act. So if you've already thought it through, and again, we don't talk about it so we get folks to be panicked about this and constantly worrying about the issue. We treat it as a topic that needs addressing, and to make sure that we've thought about it before it's actually happening. And if we haven't thought of it, we go to the untrained response side, and people can go into panic. They can go into disbelief or denial and say, well, this really isn't happening. I can't believe that this would happen in my particular workplace, because things like that don't happen here. So there's your disbelief and denial. And then helplessness. If you have no tools for your toolbox and don't have an understanding on how you're going to respond, you may have misnomers or myths as to what the best response is and what the actual reality is. And we'll talk about those different responses and how to be prepared the best that you can as a result of training. So we identify 4 suspects of workplace violence. The 4 typical types is the disgruntled employee, and we're going to talk about each one individually. The domestic violence situation, which some people will argue, well, that happens at the home outside of the workplace, but it carries over. We don't have a switch to be able to shut off things that happen at home as well. The delusional person, a person with no connection to the workplace whatsoever. And then lastly, a client or a vendor, somebody that you're interacting with, and things might go wrong with the workplace violence. So looking at the disgruntled employee, they act out towards coworkers, managers, or supervisors, some extreme stress or extreme situation in their life, such as a divorce, custody battle, illness. You may not be aware of some of these things, and we'll talk about that as we go on. They usually have a long tenure. They feel it's the end of the line for them. Extremist type views or ideology, fascination with weapons, and then importantly is leakage. And the note there is a very high percentage of suspects leak their plans, ideologies, anger targets by various means, social media, blogs, rants, etc. A lot of people will have those telltale signs that you know something is wrong and it's not being addressed in their life. And people are either turning a blind eye to it, or they're not engaging folks to make sure that their welfare, mental and physical, is okay, and trying to provide them some type of help or care or some type of assistance in order to kind of quell the disgruntledness and try to figure out why are they disgruntled, what else is going on in their life. So number 2, domestic violence. Again, we talked about this. It spills over to the workplace. You get into an argument with your spouse, your significant other, family member. That just doesn't go away on the drive into work. It's something that can fester and can continue on. The offender may or may not be employed at the workplace. If it's a spouse on the other end that's not part of the workplace, they may be disgruntled in their own right and coming into the workplace and causing some type of incident. And they could be acting out from another relationship with another employee. And that could be what's causing a domestic violence situation at home if you're married or whatnot. So very important to have a robust policy when it comes to domestic violence, to make sure that you're requiring your employee to make contact with the employer or with human resources and make sure that if it's risen to that level where there's a protection order or there's some type of violent inclination as a result of their relationship, it should be that awareness should be made at the workplace so that other people aren't become unsuspecting victims of some type of domestic violence incident between a couple. The delusional person, again, those usually refer to like a 24-hour store where, the guy or gal is working at the register. It's 2:00 in the morning. Bad guy comes in and just knows that they want particular merchandise or they want money out of the till. They don't really care about the clerk or anything about the employee. And, they're going to cause harm if their demands aren't met. So it's very hard to prepare for the delusional person because, again, there is no connection. There's no reason for them to be mad at you or have any ill feelings towards the business. It's just they may have some type of drug problem. They may have some mental health issues and not know what it is that they're doing. So it's very hard to prepare for, but it's certainly one of the elements of the workplace violence suspects. And then number 4, the client or vendor. The offender currently receives services from the workplace, often as a client or other type of consumer, or as a vendor who provides services at the workplace. So again, you may not know your client. The client comes in for the first time to articulate what it is that they're concerned with their case. You may or may not be able to help them, or you may be halfway through their case and they're not happy with the projection or how it's going. It's very important to understand the mental health of your client if they start to exhibit some undesirable behavior or something that would raise concern to say that this person could be violent as a result. Just because somebody's upset with the direction of a case does not mean they're going to be a suspect of workplace violence. However, it's certainly an indicator that if they are behaving in a pattern that is more than upset and crossing that line, looking at different patterns of behavior, which is our next slide. So problem employee is a pattern of the behavior, history of violent behavior, intimidates others, possible substance abuse, obsessed with guns, interested in past acts of violence in the workplace, makes open and valid threats, is a loner, obsessed with work. So these are all elements that can come into play that there should be some type of indication to management or other employees that should recognize a behavior change. People usually don't change overnight. It's some pattern of behavior that is changing in the negative fashion. And it's important to be able to recognize this and report this information, or if you're the employer, act upon it. And simply could be communication. What's going on in your life here? And people may get upset with you delving into their personal business, or they may be relieved that you're doing that. But it's your responsibility to make sure that we're all human and that we're trying to reach out to folks to make sure that their well-being is good. So we try to break it down for employee responsibilities. Report any instance of workplace violence and know by doing so you shouldn't be retaliated against. That would be a huge deterrent for people to report it if they were going to be retaliated against. So you shouldn't, as an employer, have to worry about outing the employee that has this concern. You're concerned for the well-being of another employee that's exhibiting some behavior that isn't really conducive to the workplace. Maintain security and situational awareness in the workplace. Great listening skills, and I can't stress that enough. Understanding and deploying de-escalation techniques with peers, giving sound advice or referring folks to HR for assistance, asking good questions, being a problem solver. Just pointing at somebody and just saying, well, your mood has changed. Well, let's find out why. Why is that mood changed and why are they behaving in the manner that they are? You probably know these folks, or you know at least a baseline as to how they behave and what their personality traits are. So if you see a change, there's something going on in their world. And it's not intrusive to ask that because, we're being human and we want to make sure that people are tracking and doing right. Is it the end-all be-all that you're going to fix everyone's problems? Of course not. But we have to give it the opportunity to be able to try to adjust and see what the issue may be. And again, if I didn't mention, great listening skills. Very important to listen to people, listen to what they're saying, and address those problems as best that you can. And a couple examples of the situational awareness in the workplace is don't allow people to piggyback into your building or secured areas off your key card. You do the swipe, you don't know what the status is of the person behind you. They could have just got a phone call saying they've just been released from the company, come on back and get your things, but do it at a manner that the management has requested. They may say, we'll meet you in the parking lot, but now you're allowing them to come in because Bill or Sally are coming into work like they normally do and don't have their swipe card for some reason. So it's very important to make sure that we don't let them to piggyback. And in checking your real estate, people go out for walks during lunch. You have windows, look outside, and if something doesn't look right, it's the typical see something, say something. If you see a vehicle that may be parked in a parking lot that doesn't belong there or seems strange to you, then you should probably give a call to the police, or at least check around in the office to say, anybody understand why this vehicle is here? Quick example, in a law firm in the community that I worked at, there was a fella in his car with a knife. He was very upset at the law firm for not doing what he expected them to do on his case. And somebody was diligent enough to look outside, recognize the vehicle, saw somebody sitting in there. He was out there for almost 2 hours. They called the police, we responded, and we understood his plan was going to be, he was going to do some harm to at least the attorney, if not some of the staff. So, kudos to them to recognize that, to say the guy had no business of being there at that time. The case was adjudicated, but he just wasn't happy with the situation. So God only knows what would have transpired had they not called the police. So rather call the police wrongly and say, oops, okay, we didn't, hey, I've just been doing here writing notes down because I'm just venting to myself or whatever. We can at least mitigate that. We rather err on the side of caution. Employer responsibility, providing reasonable plans in the event of a critical incident. You can't plan for everything. It doesn't matter how good or how robust your plans are, but you have to have something. And if you don't have it in place and you haven't exercised and communicated that plan to your employees, then you might not as well have even written it. It's got to be batteried through and trained and explained to what the expectations of everybody involved, not just a specific group, everybody, from the top to the bottom, bottom to the top. Everybody has to have buy-in. Maintain security and situational awareness in the workplace. Again, it's both the employee and the employer's responsibility. Great listening skills. We talked about that before. That is a trait that everybody needs to have when it comes to dealing with this type of situation. Taking threats, assaults, both internally and externally seriously. I don't know how many cases I've dealt with both as a police officer and as a consultant where we're responding to threats and assault that we had information prior to, and we just kind of did the hope. Well, maybe they won't go through it. Hopefully they will quit before that. Hopefully they're out of town and they won't come into town and cause any types of problems. Hope is not a plan. Knowing your employees. I had 15 people that worked for me during my shift. I knew who their spouses were, children, basic information about them because I cared about my folks. And I didn't have to go into, if they're having a cookout on Sunday, I just wanted to know about their background. So if something did arise or there was a problem, I had some historical knowledge of the person to be able to understand where they're coming from and how could I possibly assist based on whatever their situation may be. And then exercising those plans biannually to include all personnel. I can't stress that enough. Just reading or typing up a plan and sending out via email and tell people check the box or sign off saying that you read it, that does no good. You have to make sure that they understand it. If so, you need to bring in an expert to come in and do an exercise with your office. That works too. But just communicating the plan and understanding what the expectations are is something that's very important to make sure that that responsibility has been met. So we fast forward and we kind of go to the responses to the armed intruder. If God forbid you are involved in any type of situation, the following responses are in no particular order. And there's 3. It doesn't matter what type of training you get throughout the United States when it comes to responses. They're essentially all the same. They are interchangeable. You may use all of them at once, and they'll make more sense as we go through the responses. Every situation is unique, and you may utilize those bits and pieces of each response. There's no perfect or fail-safe response. We did not ask for the violence or choose our location when it happened. So it's important to understand that these responses are interchangeable, and I'll give examples as we move on. We can, however, mitigate the losses by having some tools in our toolbox. Again, that phrase. These responses extend out from the workplace to malls, schools, sporting events, and other venues where people gather. So if you're learning these tools when you're at your place of work, these tools will extend to any type of venue where you may be surrounded by other folks, and understanding that these responses work in other types of venues. All right, so how to respond. Active shooter is in your area. Absolutely paramount. Protect your own life. You can't help anybody if you are trying to help them first, if that makes any sense. And I use the analogy all the time. You're in an airplane. What do they tell you? If the oxygen goes low, the mask drop out of the ground, put up out of the ceiling, put on your mask first, then assist somebody else. Because if you pass out trying to help somebody with their mask and you don't get their mask on, you're both out of the game. So protect your own self first, and then if you're able to help others, that's fine. Visitors and clients will likely follow the lead of trained employees in these crisis situations. When people know where they're going or moving, if there's a fire alarm that goes off in a fire situation, people look to see where people are going, and they step in line and they follow because they assume that these people are moving very systematically, very calmly, and they're going to wherever it is they need to go to exit the building safely. Call 911 when it's safe to do so. I don't recommend calling it while you're trying to evolve into your response mechanism. It's tough enough to respond during a critical incident. Now you're trying to dial the phone and have finger dexterity to do 911, makes it very difficult. If you can do that, that's fine. That's on you to be able to do that. But my recommendation is make sure when you're safe and you're in a secure location, then call 911, take a breath, and then you can articulate the facts that you need to articulate, not while you're running to do one of the responses. And for the love of God, please do not pull the fire alarm, because in my community and most communities across the United States, if you pull the fire alarm, the fire apparatus shows up, not the police. So the fire departments that I've dealt with across the country in the years I've been doing this training, they ask you, please do not put that in your plan about pulling the fire alarm. Some companies actually will put that in their plan for a response. Firefighters do not want to go to an active shooter event. They want to go to a fire. So please don't incorporate them in your response. They will come eventually at the direction of the police, and there's a whole nother training with police and fire responding for victims in different recovery modes, which is an excellent training that we do in addition to that. But that's not the place for the alarm to be pulled. So again, in no particular order, response options: hiding out. Hide in the area out of the active shooter's view. You don't have to be in a 4-foot concrete barricade wall in order to be safe or shelter in place. Okay, I've run several exercises, and in one particular exercise, I had an active shooter, simulated active shooter, who was one of my SWAT team members. He walked around with a gun that shot blanks, and this was not a surprise. This was all very choreographed and planned, and we asked people to respond effectively to the sounds of gunshots. And they were unprompted by me. Some people would actually get under their desk in the cubicle area and pull their chair in. And if they had a sweater or some type of jacket hanging off the back of it, they'd make themselves small and get in the footwell of their cubicle and just hide out. And we walked around several times, and as we walked through, we were trying to locate people that didn't effectively shelter in place or hide. And once we called the all clear, I had 4 or 5 people come out from under their desk. We had no idea. We walked by them several times and had no idea that these people were actually hiding. And they're not in a concrete bunker. They're under in their footwell there. They just made themselves scarce, and they weren't able to be seen by the bad guy. Block entry to your hiding place and lock the doors. Anything not bolted down to the floor, pile it up in front of the door and stay sheltered in place until cleared by familiar or safe people. Again, if you can get into a room where you can blockade yourself in there, lock the door, that's it. I have not seen a situation across the country where somebody stopped and tried to unbarricade a door from the outside in order to get in to cause havoc. I have never seen that. They will grab the door handle and they will move on if it's locked or there's resistance on the backside. Just stay away from the edges of the door and wait for the person to move on. If you can't hide out, evacuate then. Have an escape plan in mind. Know your environment, leave your belongings, and keep your hands visible. Again, you're sitting at your desk. We're not trying to cause panic. We're not trying to cause any type of stress in your life. But you should be able to know your surroundings and know where exits come out and where those places are in your area that you can evacuate to, so people will have accountability. A lot of times I would have businesses, if I did a security assessment, say this is a great place to evacuate to, and maybe 2 businesses down from where they were, and they did the reciprocity. Hey, if you had something bad happen at your place, we would more than welcome your employees here. So that's something that management can get involved with, to have an evacuation location. So when there's a reunification and we have accountability of folks, it's a great tool to have. But again, you don't want to evacuate in a situation where you can't control the environment if you're right up against the edge of a hill, and you know if you go out that particular exit door that you really can't go anywhere and you're right next to the building, that doesn't do you a lot. You want to be able to get out of that danger zone, so to speak. So pick another exit, or that might not be an option for you to evacuate safely if you do or don't know where the shooter might be. And then lastly, just take action. And this is a response that I suggest to be the very last. If you can't hide out or shelter in place or evacuate, you may be up close and personal with the bad person. You may turn the corner and be addressed with an armed person. So as a last resort, only when your life is in imminent danger, attempt to incapacitate the active shooter, act with physical aggression, and throw items at the active shooter. It's essentially, you're trying to hurt them really bad and finish this aggression. Again, it's not something that I ever trained. People would ask me to train them in this. That is intrinsic. Taking action against somebody, again, you don't know how you're going to respond in a critical incident. You have to look deep inside yourself to say, could I inflict pain or possibly kill a bad person that is causing harm and aggression in our workplace during this situation? So again, I don't train that. That's something that's intrinsic, and we hope that you don't have to have that type of response. But it is a valid response, and certainly something that we don't want to be at the top tier. So calling 911, the dust has settled. You have felt safe in the location that you're in. Tell the dispatcher what you actually know or have seen. Don't speculate or offer conjecture. It can change the response options by law enforcement, okay? Information comes in very rapidly. Some of it's correct, some of it is false. It's not false intentionally, it's people want to help. But we're looking for the location of the shooter, number of shooters, physical description of the subject, number and type of weapons, and number of people and victims. If you just heard pop, 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 and you're in a back office of the office building, and all you know is that it was gunfire, and you have no connection with why there was gunfire in the front of that building, that's all you can say when you call 911, because you didn't see the person. All you knew it was gunfire. So keep to what you know, because law enforcement will expel resources in different locations based on information that comes in. And we want to know the most accurate and up-to-date information so that we can respond effectively and make sure that we make connection with the bad guy immediately. That is the number one goal of law enforcement. When law enforcement does arrive, remain calm and follow the officer's instructions. Raise your hands, spread your fingers. If officers are responding and see your hands, they don't know who the bad guy is. That bad guy may have dropped their weapon after doing some type of assault. But if you see your hands, you spread your fingers, they know they can't be hurt by you, and they may be walking towards you, towards the building. You may give them a key or a pass card in order to get in there. You may give them a little information. Hey, the guy has blue jeans on, a red shirt, and he's got a big rifle. That's a ton of information. But again, it's in passing. As law enforcement's focus not on you, but to get into the building and make contact and eradicate the bad guy, okay? Avoid making quick movements towards officers or try to hold them for safety. Proceed in the direction of where the officers came from. Avoid the pointing, screaming, yelling. Police officers are human. They have the blinders on. They're in probably one of the most critical events of their careers. All they know is how to respond the way that they've been trained. They're going to go to the threat and eliminate the threat. They're not looking for victims. They're not looking for injured people that are down. That's a whole nother process. And that's something that they will articulate back to the command post to let them know what they're seeing when they're going to eliminate the threat, okay? So overall, things to consider, knowing your environment, know where doors goes, what they can close to. You don't want to pigeon yourself inside an office building. You're in a 3-story office building, and that's all you work is on the first floor. Make yourself aware of the second floor or the third floor, because you know if something bad happens, that will be the day that you're on the third floor and you don't know where the stairwell goes, or you don't know that they're interconnected, or you need a swipe card to enter indoors from floor to floor. You don't know the lay of your land, and you've got to know that environment in order to employ any of these types of responses to be effective. Have situational awareness. Again, we talked about different examples of knowing of people that are hanging around the building or their real estate, or if there's cues that people are talking about that kind of make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up to say, that's not right. There's something going on in this person's life. We need to address this. Think about ahead of how you would respond in critical situations. Again, we're not trying to get people panicked. We're trying to make sure that you have the resources present so you can say, if I heard pop, pop, pop as gunfire, could I evacuate? Could I shelter in place? Does my door lock to my office? Could I make myself small and get inside my foot well? Could I pick another location in the office where there's a metal door with a locking mechanism on it that I'd feel very comfortable on? Again, that's all part of your situational awareness and knowing your environment. Make sure you have enough tools in your toolbox to be successful if you're involved in an event by planning and training and talking about it. This should not be an event that we don't talk about. This is something that we should have at the forefront to understand if things happen and they don't happen well, how are we going to adjust to make sure that we adjust to the plan? Quick story, we had a law firm I was doing an assessment for, and the elevator doors opened up and you were right on the floor of the law firm. Right there, there's a receptionist there, there's some nice couches in that area, and there's doors to different attorneys' offices. And as I was doing my security assessment, I walked in off the elevator and I kind of cringed because I said, well, we're not controlling the movement of anybody here. And I always go right over to who's ever at that front desk, and it happened to be a 63-year-old woman. And I said, what's the security plan here and the safety? And she said, well, we have some homeless people that are coming off the elevator and they're actually sleeping on the couch. And I said, oh, geez, that's terrible. And she's like, yeah, I told my grandson about it. And he gave me a big, huge industrial strength can of OC spray. And I said, oh, what is the plan with that? Well, if they start exhibiting some bad behavior, I could spray them. And I said, well, and then what? And she's like, well, I'm not sure. I'm going to spray them and then I guess run. And I said, well, okay, well, do the partners at the firm know that you have this? No, I keep it down below the desk. Nobody sees where it is. And I said, maybe a great thought, and your grandson wanting to protect grandma, but that's got to be thought out a lot more. I would not recommend having that, especially if you're not proficient in that weapon systems and knowing what the end game is. Okay. So again, having the plan, but it's got to be realistic. All right. These events are low frequency, but high intensity. So again, if they happen in your venue, it's very high intensity, but again, we don't want people to be hamstrung and stressed out about it. They are a low frequency event, but again, they are high intensity. So that's why you have to have a plan. Hope is not a plan, by the way. We don't hope that things go our way all the time. Well, we certainly do, but it's not a plan. We can control certain things in our world. Let's make sure that we can have a robust plan. We can have some training. We can have some dialogue and understand from the top down, from the bottom up, that everybody's on the same wavelength and they're understanding what the response mechanism is going to be. And lastly, be human and kind to one another. The last thing somebody needs is to be ostracized or belittled or made fun of or any type of negative connotation if they're having an event in their life where they are having a difficult time coping with it. You never know what your words can do to somebody else. It could fix them. It could help them out dramatically. They could latch on to you and say, geez, that was really nice. I was on a low spot in my life. I'm dealing with a bad custody situation with my children or a divorce or whatever the situation may be. But conversely, negative words could be very horrible for them and could drive them over the edge, or could be just another one of those facets for them to display negative behavior and realize they have no support. Let's just be human and be kind to one another. It's very important. So I appreciate your time and your considerations. Any questions? That's the website where my full bio and CV are, and our inquiries and contact information is there at robsonforensic.com. Thank you.